Next week's meeting of the Executive Committee was released today, and there are two reports that I wanted to speak to, as well as, of course, answering your questions. The first report is the Transit Expansion Projects Report, and it provides an important update on two of the city's priority transit expansion projects, the Eglinton East LRT in Scarborough and the Waterfront Transit Network. These projects will bring more transit to two areas that absolutely need it, Scarborough and the waterfront. The Eglinton East LRT will stretch from Kennedy Station to Malvern, 15 kilometres with up to 21 stops and 3 connections to GO Transit. The report that will be up for approval at the Executive Committee recommends that the City Council approve the updated design of the Eglinton East LRT to further advance the project, and would direct staff to get to work on project costs, schedules, and other important details, including an updating of the business case, so that we can get to work on building this important transit connection. I am absolutely determined to get the Eglinton East LRT underway, because I know that it will make a meaningful difference to transit users in Scarborough. Scarborough has experienced underinvestment in transit for decades, long before I was the mayor, both a transit which connects the rest of the city and Scarborough together, and also transit that allows people to move around inside of Scarborough, projects like the Eglinton East LRT, which will help Scarborough residents move around inside Scarborough. This project is firmly backed by the local councillors representing Scarborough, including Deputy Mayor Michael Thompson, councillors Jennifer McKelvey and Paul Ainsley, and by all of the local members of Parliament, and by the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, which is located right along the line. Once built, the Eglinton East LRT will travel through or beside 7 neighbourhood improvement areas which need more transit, and bring higher order transit to within walking distance of 49,000 people. This project is worth doing. It's a project that I am determined to see us move forward with. It does come with a cost, as do all transit projects, but it is an investment in the future of Scarborough and in the future of the City of Toronto, and exactly the type of project we need to move our city, all parts of it, forward. The report also provides an update on the planning work underway on the Waterfront Transit Network. Once built, this will provide new and improved transit across the eastern waterfront, and it is much needed as this area develops and grows. Waterfront transit, east and west, must be a priority for the city, given the development, both already built and planned new development. We see to the west what can happen if you permit the development without the transit. We have to keep moving transit forward in all parts of our city, and that is why we're moving ahead with these two projects, and why we're continuing to work with the province to move forward its major transit projects as agreed with them. The second report that I want to speak about today, that is in the agenda for the Executive Committee meeting, is the report on a vacant home tax for Toronto. We knew before the pandemic that we needed to increase the housing supply, affordable housing in particular, but all housing supply, and ensure that the city remains a place where all members of the workforce can think about living, can contemplate living here. In the wake of the pandemic, this becomes more important than ever. I've long supported a vacant home tax in principle. I first raised the issue in 2017 and raised it with the provincial government to seek at that time and receive permission for the City of Toronto to implement such a tax if the Council chose to do so. This report recommends moving forward with the implementation of a vacant home tax that would commence starting in 2022. Staff estimate that at 1% of a property's value, it would raise $55 to $66 million a year that we could then invest in things like affordable housing initiatives. More importantly, it will encourage people not to leave homes vacant. That is the real purpose of the tax, is not to have homes that are sitting vacant at a time when we have a shortage of housing in the city. It will help to make more housing available. I want to be very clear. The vast majority of Toronto residents will not pay this tax. If you live in your house or your condo right now, you will not pay this tax. If you own another house or condo and you lease it out to somebody, there is a tenant in it, you will not pay this tax. If you're sick and you have to go in the hospital or into long-term care, you will not pay this tax. Even if you go to Florida for half the year or have to have your house renovated for a period of time and it's vacant during the renovations, you will not pay this tax. We also know that Vancouver implemented this in 2017, raising $38 million that year and $39.8 million in 2018. And the mayor of Vancouver has been quoted as saying that this tax resulted in the return of thousands of homes to the housing market so that people could live in those homes, those condos and homes, as opposed to them being vacant. We know from Vancouver's experience as well that the sky didn't fall when this tax was brought in any way, shape, or form. So I support moving ahead with this as a housing measure and doing everything we can to make sure it is implemented in the right way. And the report deals mainly with questions of the implementation of the tax, which is not something that is simple to do and will take some time to do, hence that you'd move forward to actually see the tax paid by people for the first time in not earlier than 2022. We simply can't afford, from the housing perspective, to have housing accommodation for thousands of people sitting empty. It's just not something that we can afford to do in the city of Toronto, which I hope to see restored soon as one of the fastest growing cities in the world, because that represents confidence in Toronto. It represents confidence by people from around the world and investors from around the world. It means jobs, but we've got to have the housing available to go with that growth when it resumes. Not if it resumes, when it resumes. You can live in it, you can rent it, but if it sits empty, you will pay a tax. And that helps us to, for example, build more affordable housing that people can live in, and it encourages people who own this kind of housing to make it available to others to live in on an economic basis for them, but it just encourages it not to sit empty. So both of these reports will be at the Executive Committee next week, and both move our city forward and ensure that we get on with building. We get on with building transit, we get on with increasing the supply of housing, and continue with our efforts to build more affordable housing. And I will be commending these reports to my colleagues for discussion and for the beginnings of a public input process that, of course, happens as we go through the committee process and on to City Council. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. We will now open the floor to questions. As a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up, and you'll have to unmute yourself as well. So first up, we have David Ryder. Go ahead, David. Just remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, the system's a little weird today. Mayor, can you mentioned the logistics are in the report, which most of us haven't had a chance to read. There was some concern in the past in Toronto about how do we identify these vacant homes, and is it going to be kind of more trouble than it's worth? What is your understanding of how city staff want to proceed?
Well, the city staff have recommended in the report that we use the method called universal declaration, which means that every taxpayer, there's about, I think, 900,000 households in Toronto, that everybody would have to fill out a declaration saying this property is occupied by me or by a tenant or by someone else and is not vacant. And so they recommend that as the choice as to how we determine vacancy. There is an administrative cost. In Vancouver, it's cost about $3 million a year to run the system to process those forms as they come in. But of course, as we note, it has also raised a certain amount of money. And as the mayor of Vancouver says, it has returned thousands of homes that were sitting vacant to the housing market. So now we begin a process of public consultation and discussion, as happens with every measure that goes through the city committee process, and people can depute and make their views known, and the city staff and the councillors will take that into account. But that's the recommendation that's made. I think this is a measure, worth proceeding with, because what it will do is it will make sure that people who have homes that are presently sitting vacant as an investment or for any other reason will have to think carefully about whether they leave those homes vacant. They will have to fill out a form that tells the city if their units are vacant or not, and then they have a choice as to whether to pay the tax if they want to do that for any reason, or to return that housing unit to the marketplace so someone can rent it or buy it, so that we can have more housing available for Torontonians.
Thank you. And my follow-up is on the transit report. It seems to say that the cost of an Eglinton East LRT in Scarborough has gone up from $2.3 billion to at least $4 billion, and that's unfunded. So A, is it realistic? And B, is it realistic to think that there will be both an LRT and a subway in Scarborough? Could we do both, given just one of them is going to be $4 billion?
Well, I've made the point, even this morning, that the two transit projects in Scarborough, which has had a historic underinvestment in transit of any kind, are both going to serve different purposes and are both necessary. The subway will be a direct connection to the rest of the city for Scarborough residents, which they haven't really had. The Scarborough East, Eglinton East LRT will connect up parts of Scarborough to each other, including to the Scarborough campus of the U of T and to Malvern, a community that has sat in a way isolated, which I think denies people even access to opportunity and to jobs and so on. The cost the cost estimate is now about $4 billion. I think we have a good start that is potentially available to us in that there's been almost $1 billion collected by a Scarborough Transit levy that is sitting in an account today. And while we have to have some discussions with the province about the use of that money, it has not been committed elsewhere. And so, obviously the support of the MPs is going to be important to getting the federal government to partner with us on this. And the city's going to have to decide as well that it can find the means to move forward with this project. But one thing I'm not going to do easily, and hopefully not at all, is I'm not going to let questions that arise about how expensive it might be or how long it might take or the complications of design stop us from doing the things that we must do as a city. For decades, we didn't build any transit in Scarborough. For decades, we hardly built any transit in the whole of the city, which has now become, I'm proud to say, one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And that means we have to keep up with building transit, and that's exactly what we're going to do by moving these projects forward.
Okay, thanks, David. Next up, we have Tiffany Hensby from News Talk 1010. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Hi, good morning, Mayor Tory. I wanted to ask you about a story in the Star this morning that the former CEO of Create TO offered city staff front-of-the-line access to affordable rental units. Just like your reaction to that, and how do you react to learning someone in the public service would act this way?
Well, it's completely unacceptable. And what I'm, content with is the fact that upon that coming to the attention of the management and the board of Create TO, they moved immediately to stop it. They then moved immediately to investigate, and some people were terminated from their employment as a result of that. And within a period of almost weeks, the City Council has changed the policy or made the policy very clear such that it shouldn't have had to be made clear, but they've now made it abundantly clear that kind of thing is not supposed to go on. So I was very unhappy with it, but I was actually quite content that it was dealt with in a very quick manner by Create TO in a very clear manner, and that people actually did lose their jobs for behavior that was not consistent with what we would expect of public servants.
Okay, so my follow-up would be, did Brian Johnston quit or was he fired, and did he leave with any sort of severance?
Well, I think the bottom line with Mr. Johnson is that he's left the company. He's no longer with the company, and the precise basis upon which he left is the subject of a confidentiality agreement. But he's left, and I think that in that sense, it closes the book on that in the context of him having been the person that wrote the email and others having responded to that email. But then the board, I think, acted very appropriately in shutting the whole thing down, investigating and taking action to deal with those who had done something that was not up to the standard that we would expect.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. Next up, we have Momin Qureshi from 680. Go ahead, Momin.
Good morning, sir. My question is about the Eglinton East LRT. It is currently unfunded. We know before the pandemic hit, you were really pushing to get funding for several things, but now that governments are spending record money, do you still have any sort of confidence that the other two levels of government will be able to find the money to fund this type of project?
I'm confident they will find the money to help us invest because I think they understand this is in the best interest of adequately servicing one of the fastest growing cities in the world, the economic engine of all of Canada. It is going to be supportive of the fact that we're going to move thousands of jobs to Scarborough as part of our reorganization of city real estate. And I think it is just consistent with trying to make sure that people who live in some of the most marginalized, isolated neighborhoods in the city are given access to opportunity through improved transit, including thousands of students at the U of T who don't have adequate transit to get to the Scarborough campus there. So I think that they will see the merits of that and see all the jobs that will be created by the construction and will partner with us as they've done in many different instances. It's not easy these days because we have a lot of things we're trying to deal with in the pandemic that cost a lot of money, but these kinds of longer term investments we have to move forward with, because if you don't start these projects, then they never get finished, and we all know they take a long time.
That's it. No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next up, we have Matt Bingley from Global. Go ahead, Matt.
Good morning, Mayor. I just want to follow up on David's question about reporting. The vacant home tax would require people, well, really a lot of faith in people to come clean. You listed off a number of people who wouldn't be affected by it. Short-term rentals aren't in there. What do you do when somebody says it's not vacant, it's just a short-term rental?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I've read the report, and there are a number of exemptions that are given for renovations, for medical reasons, for people who go to Florida for half the year but do still live in their homes. I just don't remember, to be honest with you, Matt, and I'd have to look in the report to see what it says about that. I know it's covered. I just don't remember exactly what it said, and I don't want to give you an answer that is ignorant or incorrect. So I'm happy to get back to you on that. I will just say this. yes, anytime you have a law, a regulation, a tax, or even an application for any kind of a rebate, you rely on people to fill out forms and to be honest. And the vast majority of people are honest. There are easy ways for us to kind of figure out someone who might have said, I live in the house, it's occupied, and then it uses no water and no electricity. I'm not sure that we'll have access to that information, but, I just think that what you'll find is that people, as has been the case in Vancouver, have been straightforward about filling out the forms. There are some people who choose, obviously, to leave their unit vacant and pay the tax. That's why they're taking in whatever it is, $39 million there. And that's a choice people have. We're just saying we're going to try and discourage that choice and encourage people to put the housing into the market so that people can rent it or buy it, because we just don't think it makes sense for a lot of housing, thousands of units to sit vacant at a time when we have a shortage, especially when the growth in the city resumes. But I'll get back to you with respect to the question of short-term rentals. I just don't remember what it says.
That it's early. My follow-up question just has to do with, the last time this was brought up, people suggested that a luxury home tax would actually be more feasible and easier to, really enforce. Are you still looking at that at all, or is that something that you are moving away from?
I can tell you right now, the only tax measure that we're actively discussing is this one, because I think this is not a time to be looking at, even with larger and more expensive homes, to be looking at increasing people's taxes unduly. I think people are under a lot of different kinds of stresses and strain at the moment, and that what I want to do is continue to manage the city's finances prudently. Let's remember that a luxury home tax will raise some money, but the main purpose of this vacant home tax is not to raise money. I'd be happy if this tax didn't raise any money, because it meant there were no homes sitting vacant. They were all either lived in by somebody or rented out to somebody, because that's what we're looking to do here, is increase the supply of housing for people to rent or own and not have housing sitting vacant. And so the luxury home tax, I think, serves a different purpose, which is just to raise money. And, that's a fair objective to try to do, because obviously we have increasing expenses, but it's not something that's under consideration at this time.
Okay, last question is Tess from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Tess. You just need to unmute yourself. Perfect.
Thanks. Hi, Mayor. I'm wondering if you can tell me if the money from the home tax would be reinvested in affordable housing?
Well, I made reference. It's not for me to make that decision. I think it would be, I think it would be something that would line up well with the public if you said that the proceeds of this tax would be reinvested. And of course, we're spending millions upon tens of millions of dollars on the affordable housing, on which we have a really solid start on achieving our objectives of 40,000 new units. I mean, we have thousands that are in the approval process or actually under construction at this time. And that involves quite a lot of foregone revenue by the city, foregone development charges, and different things we do to incent that affordable housing to be built. And so I'd be quite happy with that disposition. The report does not speak to what's done with the proceeds, but I would be quite happy with that kind of a disposition, because I think the public like to know that when a tax like that is being collected, that it is going to a particular purpose. But it's not for me at this stage to make that determination. That will be something that will arise out of the deliberations by the public, but also by the City Council, which is beginning with this report.
And then my follow-up would be, with the land transfer tax, the uniquely Toronto sort of subcharge on buying a new home, does this have the potential to cannibalize that tax by disincentivizing real estate investment?
No, I think, look, the Toronto housing market, I think, is proving itself right now to be remarkably healthy. There are reports out today, backing that up. I think that we're going to return after the pandemic is over to an environment of more immigration coming to Toronto, more investment coming to Toronto, and restore our place as one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And so I think the real estate market will remain robust, which is all the more reason why we can't afford to have thousands of units sitting vacant. We need those units to be available to people to rent or to buy, and that's what this tax is meant to do, just to make sure that people don't just have housing, condos, homes, or whatever, that it's just sitting and not used by anybody. And some people may choose to leave their home vacant and pay the tax, but we're hoping a lot of people will put that housing back into the market and make it available to all the people that will be coming to Toronto to work here, to invest here, and that's the mark of a successful city, that kind of growth that we've seen, as long as we manage it well.
Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.